Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to week 8. Um, Man, time's flying. Spring break is next week. Just an important reminder that there is an exam this week. I will open that exam up as soon as it's ready, um, and then please finish it. The deadline is midnight on Sunday, so it will be available soon. And then take it when is convenient for you. I know a lot of you work and have other things going on with your schedule, so please complete it by midnight on Sunday. This week's material is really a high level overview. In some ways, it's a summary of what we've covered the first 8 weeks. It's also, in a lot of ways, a review for the exam. So, not a lot of new material here, uh, but some familiar material, sort of maybe reworded in slightly different ways. So both the final chapter in the Resilience Thinking book, as well as the supplementary, required, so not entirely supplementary, but the additional PDF reading, highlighted principles for sort of resilience practice or resilience, thinking about resilience and sustainability. I'm going to highlight the principles that were covered in the PDF reading, although they overlap very well with the reading and resilience thinking. So the first principle they discuss is maintaining diversity and function. Diversity, basically promoting and sustaining diversity in all forms. So that's ecological diversity, social diversity, human diversity, organizational diversity. All those kinds of diversity are really important. And this sort of gets at really some of the key points that we focused on over the last 4 weeks. Response diversity, that differences in size and scale of components of systems give them the ability to respond differently to disturbance. So that's a form of redundancy that allows higher levels of resilience because certain components have, although they may serve the same function, if they're different species or different size, different scale, they respond differently. And then also functional redundancy, so that the presence of multiple components that perform the same function essentially provide an insurance within the system. So this the reading articulates this is the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And then just important to note that this also does apply to organizations, so that a diversity of organizations are actually more resilient and provide a better response diversity than sort of all one kind of organizations. Key principle number 2 is manage connectivity. And again, thinking in social ecological systems terms, this connectivity, we're thinking about that both as ecological connectivity as well as social connectivity. Simply defined connectivity, the structure and strength with which resources, species, or actors disperse, migrate, and interact across patches, habitats, social domains in a social ecological system. I believe for those of you that are majoring in ecology, connectivity is a really key concept these days, thinking about connectivity corridors that connect core patches of habitat. Ecological connectivity is really important for the maintenance of biodiversity. It allows species to sort of migrate or move from core habitat patch or patches. And then increasingly we think about social connectivity, thinking about networks, the way those connections, the power of social capital, and the relationships between organizations, to really provide resilience to disturbance. So how do relationships, how do social networks provide a buffer, provide resilience, build resilience to shocks or disturbance? Next key principle, manage slow variables and feedbacks. Again, this was covered over the last few weeks. I think this is really important. Think about the way that slow variables, they change slowly, but they have the real impact of altering or changing a system in an undesirable way. The example that's given here in this reading, but also over the last few weeks in the readings, was phosphorus loading in lakes. How that changes really slowly all the time, over time, but eventually a high phosphorus level can really flip the state of the system into an undesirable state. So this is really managing slow variables, thinking about them, identifying thresholds, is really key to keeping these ecosystem services functioning in a way that is desirable for us. And thinking about how we configure those systems in the right way. Just to sort of to define feedbacks here. It's been defined in the past, but I think understanding feedback loops is really important. So just feedbacks as the two-way connectors between variables that reinforce positive feedbacks or dampen change. So the negative feedback slows down change, positive feedback speeds up change. The next key principle, complex adaptive systems thinking. This was something that was really emphasized in the first few weeks. Social ecological systems thinking in general is about complex adaptive systems and thinking about emergent properties and the way system components interact. So just a few bullet points here, thinking about systems, expect uncertainty, integrate nonlinearity into thinking and planning. Not all the change will be at a linear scale or pace. The match institutions and social ecological processes, so the problem of fit between ecological systems and governance jurisdictions or governance strategies or management strategies. And then recognizing barriers for cognitive change. One thing we haven't talked a lot about these first 8 weeks, but is really critical to the overall sort of field of resilience and thinking about social ecological systems is learning. We talk about social learning a lot in this sort of interdisciplinary thinking. The way that you learn inherently through your peers, through interaction, through participation. Learning is a really important component of participatory management, participatory governance, that the idea that if we increase participation, which we'll talk about here in a second, through the process of that participation, learning is actually increased by everyone. So just a few key points here. Learning, is really an integral part of decision making, particularly when we're thinking about adaptive management, adaptive co-management, or adaptive governance frameworks, because it is a way that we internalize those feedback loops. So you think about learning and feedback is sort of one and the same. If the system is providing feedback and we're engaged, or there are systems really set up for us to learn and to experiment and to observe the system, then we're learning about that feedback. Participatory engagement, so participatory monitoring, participatory experimentation. This has also been called active adaptive management. Cross-scale learning, so how do we learn from those that operate at a higher sort of scale or level than we do? So can I learn about international policy or domestic policy even though I'm working on my farm? If I'm a federal policymaker, can I learn from that farmer? Emphasizing that there are appropriate social contexts for learning. Some situations are better for learning than others. For example, the difference between an in-class class and an online class. That sometimes works better for others. Certain contexts work better for others than other contexts. And then thinking about learning in the context of networks and communities of practice. So this again gets to the social learning piece, that we create communities of practice around us. We through interaction with our peers, that is a valuable space for learning. Broadening participation. This is something we have really either implicitly or explicitly. A lot of the reading up to date has talked about this notion of broadening participation in the environmental governance process, involving a diversity of stakeholders, increases resilience by improving legitimacy, expanding the depth and diversity of knowledge, and helping to detect and interpret disturbances or perturbations in the system. So when that feedback is starting to come, even if it's just really at a really small level, citizens engage. This is sort of the notion of citizen science, so that if people are out there on the landscape observing change, they can really provide early detection of the system feedback. But through the process of participation, really important concepts of building trust, building mutual understanding of situations, and then offering unique knowledge bases or unique perspectives of A, what the problem is, and B, what potential solutions might be. Just really important to note that participation is not a panacea, meaning more participation is not always better, that there is a really important quality dimension to participation. And it's really important to think about how and in what stages participation occurs, and then sort of to what depth of participation. So there's been a ton of research on participation and identifying places where participation is occurring, quote unquote token participation, that you have the right stakeholders there, but really just to rubber stamp a decision that you've already made. So thinking about really authentic participation that uncovers unique perspectives, that actually builds trust and mutual understanding, etc. So here's a new term, probably the only new term to date: polycentric governance. Polycentric governance, really by definition, is thought of as overlapping spheres of jurisdiction and decision-making authority across multiple scales. The reading talks about this as nested institutions. So you think about a community-based conservation institution nested within a regional or landscape institution, which is also nested within a national institution. So this type of thinking connects hierarchies and structures, really starts to address the challenge of fit. So how do we fit management, decision-making institutions with the scale and the boundaries of ecological problems? And then really the sort of the theory here, or the thinking, is that well-connected governance structures can swiftly deal with change and disturbance because they're addressed by the right people at the right time. That sounds like a panacea to me, but wouldn't that be great, right? If we were able to design governance structures where the right people at the right time could address the problem. A couple of caveats: the need to balance redundancy and experimentation with the costs of involving members. So there are costs to participation. Thinking about balancing that with the benefits, and then negotiating trade-offs between users of ecosystem services. So not everybody values ecosystem services the same. Not everyone values nature the same. Not everyone has the same perspective on what's valuable in the landscape. And So those are real challenges to participation, and particularly to an idea like polycentric governance that is very inclusive and says, lots of people should have an active role in solving these challenges. That's great, except for when these different people have different perspectives about what the answer is, or what the problem is. But polycentric governance, I really like the term. I use it in my research and writing quite a bit. I think it's a really neat framework to think about how governance might be designed within a landscape or within a region. So again, a couple of quick short readings this week, and the exam is this week. Please let me know if you have any questions, and good luck.